Okay. Hi guys, we're Nick and Raj from Animation College. This is a group thing, so there's actually, I guess we're the core researchers, but there's guys at the college in our research support group that contributed to this concept. So we're basically just going to talk to you about an app concept that we have that we want to develop and talk about just a few related kind of contexts. So I'm going to present the first part, and then Raj is going to be available for technical questions. So we've got an app concept that allows a group of people to simultaneously photograph a subject with their mobile devices to automatically assemble a 3D object. The presentation is just going to look at a few things, so some potential pros and cons for the app as a tool for either journalism, marketing, or art making. So it could be used in a variety of ways. So one of the first directions was like an idea that this could be a cool kind of alternative media journalistic tool. So we're looking at traditional photojournalism and how it seeks to objectively capture a moment, but that brings up the idea that there's an individual photographer, and while they may be following ethical standards and doing their best to be objective, they obviously have their own personal point of view. So that's going to influence the way they frame the photograph. And also, if it's traveling through the mainstream media, then it's obviously going to be filtered at another level. So we end up with something that's actually quite constructed. As you can tell, it kind of feels like an oil painting. It's got kind of messages about heroism in it. We don't really know what the real story is. So the photograph is despatialized, so it's a 2D image, both literally and figuratively. It suggests that perhaps if the events photographed from many perspectives by many photographers, we can reconstruct the event in 3 dimensions. So the resulting model figuratively and metaphorically represents many perspectives. So the significance of that event is actually a collective thing, comes a group recognition. So in theory, the idea of there being a mediating effect could be reduced. And so we've added the element of space to the despatialized photograph. So that was kind of one of the first ideas we had. So there's pros and cons to this. The exciting thing was, it could be this really cool way to provide another avenue for alternative media reportage. In theory, it means that citizens could group together to report events in an unbiased manner. It's like in theory, but obviously things like the ethics behind it, the copyright issues, the ownership issues are very cloudy. I guess it ties into the whole surveillance problem as well. It's also could be quite impractical. There's probably ways around the impracticalities, but then it would require a whole lot of more kind of thought and preparation and organisation. But some key questions are, how can participants photograph events they're immediately involved in? For example, soldiers in war zones, or citizens in riots or protests, or in areas where there are not actually any crowds available to do this. So that, so we were just thinking, well, this actually suits something where we have a more organised event with stable crowds, which led into a more commercial application for this concept. Just open up the video. Where is it?
The inspiration for this idea came from looking at some existing tools. Autodesk's 123D Catch, which builds and textures 3D models from photos, 3D printing technology, and external flash, which allows you to control 2 camera flashes simultaneously. These tools got us thinking. What if you were at an historical event, like a political rally, or a major sports game? Let's say you're at the Rugby World Cup. Before the game starts, you sign up to a special service through which you can pre-order 3D models or sculptures of the event in exchange for the photos you take. There are hundreds or even thousands of others signed up to the same service, taking photos of the event from every conceivable angle. Each photo is geotagged and time-stamped. The photos and the metadata are then sent to a database. An algorithm will sort through the database and select similar photos that were taken at the same time. The photos will then be processed by automated software, similar to 123D Catch, which will create models of the event. These could be 3D printed at any scale for personal or public use as commemorative items or as three-dimensional historical records.
Where the hell is it? So this has its own set of problems and affordances. So it becomes a fairly clear cut who owns what. So we see a lot of commercial possibilities, subscription fee, selling the final sculpture. There's lots of opportunities to, marry up with events and do marketing and advertising and things like that. Can build a community of people that are interested in participating. And this could all be driven by competition. So if there's like the Rugby World Cup and we're saying, let's try and capture the most exciting try of the match or something like that, and so we're driving interest in that way. But then on the other hand, there's a myriad of technical challenges. So they mainly relate to accuracy and distortion. So accessibility and occlusion. So that really is just talking about, do we have enough angles? Do we have enough good photographs that are not obscured? Reflective surfaces cause a lot of disruption, and obviously movement is probably one of the larger issues at stake. And then just creating the algorithm that can find and match the common features. So we're going to have there'll be databases with masses of images in there. How do we sort those and get the best images, which is slightly mitigated by the idea of having competitions to focus the photography. And then all of those issues lead to the resolution and quality of the end product. So would people want to buy it if it's too highly distorted? So that question led to the next kind of train of thought was, well, are all of these technical issues a problem, or could they be an affordance? So there are 3 kind of trains of thought from all of the other things we looked at. So the technical problems could be turned around as an affordance. The idea of the spatialized photograph is still really interesting and could be explored in a more of an artistic way. And the idea of participatory generated artwork and the idea of the collective experience is also very interesting. So we're thinking we could actually use this more as an experimental tool. So just quickly, I want to look at the 3 different tracks. So this is somebody that's actually taking advantage of the technical problems. Lorna Barnshaw, this is a work called Replicants, and she's looking at the idea that we're made of data, so our DNA is data, but now our digital identities are data, and what's the relationship between those two things? So it's basically a classic interpretation of Baudrillard's idea of the simulacra. Her experiments investigate the exterior relationship between our physical and online selves, and how technology affects our sense of identity. And then actually printing them out becomes a tactile expression of that idea. And for me anyway, it's an invitation to consider, where do we go from here, in terms of as our relationship between technology becomes more blurred. So just quickly, there's the 3 experiments. So this is a 1 to 3D catch result. So it can actually be quite distorted. The goal is not to the commercial goal is not to have something like this, but it can actually be used to produce some quite interesting results. This is Cubify Capture, which translates video footage into a 3D print, which creates even more distortion. And then this is just traditional laser scanning. So this is, as accurate as we get, I guess, but you can still see it's quite disturbing and confronting. And then the second thread is the idea of that spatialized photograph. So this idea kind of takes that a little bit further and adds like the 4th dimension of time to the idea. So these are some experiments called motion structures that a guy called Ray Garcia and his team have been playing with. Basically, they've created a plugin to some medical imaging software that can compress video frames into a single object, and this is actually a 90-second Game of Thrones intro that's been compressed into an object. And then the third thread is the idea of a collective experience of an event. So this is something I built with a software engineer a couple of years ago. It's a participatory audience-generated art where they're building their own avatars and programming them with behaviors. And after they've built those avatars, they share data between each other. So the different avatars will transform each other and create a new artwork. So each person travels through the installation. They're continually programming how the artwork's going to behave. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, almost there. So this highlights the potential of the app as a way to collectively generate artworks with ideas of identity as data. So those are the 3 threads. They could be used as a reflexive art making tool. It's another way this could go. So we're just thinking where to next. Basically, we want to build the commercial product, but we're aware that a lot of interesting things could happen along the way, and personally I'm quite interested in looking at the mistakes and seeing where they might lead. There's quite a lot of potential there. So yeah, so thanks for inviting us. We're open up for questions.
The question is more kind of a comment, I guess.
Yep.
Maybe we're interested if you moved away from the indexicals, I guess. One of the things that occurs to me is that you're part of what you're talking about is kind of collaborative motion capture. And the sport example is really interesting because there are lots of people that recreate sporting events in like video, for example. It's not about creating something that's authentic. It's about recreating things in a different medium. So you could do a collaborative motion capture that translates into something other than sculpture. It could translate into, say, animation.
Yeah, I like
a really attractive toy.
I like the idea that there's an event and it is an actual thing, but there's many people involved and they've all got their own subjective interpretation. So the idea was to try and see if we can find an average of that, I guess. That does bring up the idea of subjectivity and the distortion is very interesting. I think that's something we could actually, I'm more interested in anyway, as the distortion.
You're interested in more users, more participants as possible.
Yeah, that's the idea with the is to get closer and closer to something that's considered accurate. You need more angles and more. But also because you got to get the right time. So the more people there are, the closer you get to having an open moment. It's just so much distortion. There's so much distortion involved. That's kind of interesting. So I'm trying to create something that's accurate with the distortion as a byproduct. Would be more interesting.
Translating into animation means you've got more aggressive possibilities. For me, it could be more people.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, that would be it sounds difficult, but yeah,
I'll just like yeah.
Yeah. Max, can you switch off your microphone, please? Max. It's Max.
All these different perspectives in a moment, an object that is the sum of various moments, which is why the injection of time is so interesting. How about it sounds like the technology is a mediating tool, especially between the forces of competition and collaboration. Because if you, for instance, are using factors like quality of image to determine which are the ones which are valid.
Yeah, then you bring back the judge, is a judgment being the name.
That's right. Yeah. And have you thought about what are the minimal number of participants in order for it to work?
It's subjected to the event, so there's no limit for this. As per the if you take as a 1 to 3D catch as an example, as a reference, then it's needed around 20 to 40 images to get matching points, to get the 3D model of the matching points. So it's at 20 to 30 as per the existing 1 to 3D catch, but it's a future stuff, so there's nothing thought of. It's because the event, you never know how many people comes. It's like maybe 5,000, 10,000, and depends on the event also. And again, there is some technical aspects also need to be considered. Whether is it a stage, then the people will be only have access to only a certain area, whereas in a stadium you have access to 360 area. So there's some points to be considered. Get the this idea to be worked out actually.
You also said that it clarified copyright issues for you. Does it really? If you have, does that mean you only own a small portion of whatever you contribute?
I think what it does is it basically says I will contribute X number of photos, and in exchange I will have access to models. So it's really, it depends on the contract that's signed. what the terms and conditions are. So it's just kind of an exchange.